Greetings, I am Chaplain Captain Jennifer Ray, United States Air Force Active Duty, Royal Air Force Base Mildenhall in the UK. I am presenting to you the religious ministry plan for the command action leadership to be privy to how to care for, treat, identify, and understand more about moral injury in our service members. We're going to begin with the objectives of this religious ministry plan, and is to understand the military chaplain and self-care. It's also to understand the character of the military chaplain, what should be the character of the military chaplain, administering the care to our members. We're going to talk about recalibration and soul repair and how the chaplain assists and aids in helping our members to recalibrate their circumstances in order to reach toward soul repair. We're also going to talk about the command action plan and give a module of what that should look like as we approach the religious ministry plan and the details of the religious ministry plan. So with that, we'll begin with the military chaplain and self-care. Because the military chaplain is the foundation of caring for others, is what we do as military chaplains. We care for others. It's important for we ourselves to care for ourselves and look at self-care as something that is paramount before we are able to serve. We want to make sure that we are caring for ourselves. It's foundational to the military chaplain, and I always say that one should always pour out of their overflow. That is to say that the military chaplain, and really in any profession where you are caring for others, you need to only pour out of your overflow. And that is to say that you need to be filled with 100% of what you need before you're able to give to anybody else what they need. So when you reach 101% of what you need, that 1% is for work or for family, your job, whatever is else beyond what you need to feel whole, feel complete, feel fulfilled. So making sure that we are in overflow on our self-care is important to us, but it's also important to the people that we commit our lives to helping. Battle buddies and wingmen are important to the team of the caregiver, especially the military chaplain. And when I say battle buddies, wingmen, I'm speaking more so of the religious support team as a team. So the RPs, the religious affairs airmen, the chaplain assistants as a team need to be really intentional about caring for one another and reaching in. So not necessarily just kind of say, hey, how you doing, and not waiting for the answer, but perhaps asking a second time more slowly, or looking into the individual's eyes, waiting for an answer, a sentence answer, complete sentence to what exactly is going on with them and how they're doing. So reaching in and reaching beyond just the surface level of checking in with our folks. And that helps to undergird the essential care for the caregiver. And I like what Chief Cooper said in his Zoom call. And actually Chief Cooper and Chaplain Butler Seeger, they both talked about very different personal experiences of moral injury, their personal experience of moral injury. But the underlying theme, one of the underlying themes for both of their talks was self-care. So how important that is, and how important it is for the religious support team to care for one another and to reach in and to be a support for one another, be a battle buddy for one another. The one thing that Chief Cooper mentioned that I really enjoyed him sharing was that from his moral injury in combat, the thing that hurt him most was his lack of support from his leadership. That inflicted even further moral injury, and probably more detrimental moral injury for him, because he did not get what he needed from his leadership to allow him the time and the space to get the help that he needed to heal and repair his soul. Chaplain Butler Seeger mentioned something that is so key, that when that type of injury happens, where you have the moral injury perhaps from combat, and an additional inflicted moral injury by not getting the support from those who are around you and supposed to take care of you, your brothers and sisters in arms, it takes a toll on you. And she mentioned the concept of blue on blue harm, blue on blue injury. That is to say, my service member, my brother and sister in arms did not take care of me. And then she further expounded and said that the injury, the moral injury of that kind of injury where our brother and sister in arms is not taking care of us and not giving us the support that we need. She mentioned the effects of that on the member are very much so correlated to how an incest injury plays out and how an incest injury is treated. That the family of the military is treated and viewed as such by our members, and when we don't get that family support, it can be detrimental to our soul. So I thought that was key into making sure that not only we care for ourselves, but we care for one another as a family, a team of service members who know the potentials of harm in what we do, and to reach in and make sure that our members, our battle buddies, our wingmen are okay. And it's important to do that so that we don't cause further moral injury. And self-care and taking care of one another is just vital to the capacity of the chaplain and the Religious Affairs Airman, or the RP, to provide adequate care for the service member. Because as I discussed, you can't care for others on empty. You have to be full with what you need to be fulfilled in order to feel as though you have enough to give others. Otherwise, you are cheating the service members that you care for by going around, doing what you do on fumes of what needs to be within, instead of being actually full and ready to give. We don't want to cheat our service members out of what they need, lest we perhaps unknowingly do that blue on blue injury of pretending to be okay to care for others. But that member that is getting that care on fumes from the chaplain who is not yet full, from the RP who is not yet full, can likely sense that they're not getting what they need. And so we don't want to provide care that's inadequate as not to produce any further injury to our folks, our service members. So self-care is foundational, primary, fundamental for the chaplain and the RP to have, to make sure that they are okay enough to care for someone else. Additionally, which kind of flows into the character of the military chaplain, we need to make sure that the military chaplain has a character of integrity. We've seen a lot of things, just recently in the news, I've seen quite a few articles about chaplains lacking integrity and actually doing harm to others. And just making sure that our character is in line with, first and foremost, our faith values, our true faith values, and that the tenets of our faith values are actually lived out, not just in the work center, not just when we are in the pulpit, but when we're at home with our families, that who you are when nobody's looking is still intact. So integrity is vital to the chaplain. Character matters. That's one of our core values in the military, United States Air Force, is integrity first. Integrity first. So members must know that their chaplain is capable of offering to them safe and sacred space. And a military chaplain must offer safe and sacred space if they want their members to come to them. And if you, as a military chaplain, do not exhibit the character of someone who has integrity, our members will pick that up and will no longer value your space as safe and sacred, which directly impacts how we are able to care for our members. They will not come to you. They will not talk to you. They will not engage with you and tell you their true feelings, how they're doing. They may entertain you, but they won't go deep with you. If there's a moral injury, you will never know if you're not capable of carrying the character of one who has integrity. Because integrity says to our members that I can be safe with you. And that safety is what our morally injured need in order to self-disclose in order to tell their story, in order to dig deep into their pain. So our integrity matters. And when we commit our lives, just like doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, when we commit our lives to God, when we say, God, I will serve, I am called and I will serve, there is an expectation and responsibility of integrity and character and love that the chaplain must exude, must embody, must be, must live, in order to let their light shine to glorify God and draw people in so that we can care for them. So the faith tenets of the chaplain should be an integral part of the chaplain's overall being, as we are visible examples and reminders of the holy. Trust is necessary for the chaplain to have with our service members in order for the chaplain to be considered a warrior chaplain, and trusted with the warfighter that can inspire spiritual toughness in the face of adversity. So the warrior chaplain is something that is mentioned in our studies, and I really wanted to hone in on the idea of the warrior chaplain. The character of the military chaplain should be that of a warrior, because we want to be trusted by our members so that they can disclose. But Jensen and Childs describe the concept of the military chaplain as a warrior chaplain in their writings, and they are basically saying one who's astute in character, one who can inspire toughness in our members, one who can reach in and be in the trenches with our members, not one who pretends, not one who's trying to, I don't know, be the life of the party or kind of make a spectacle of themselves, because chaplains tend to sometimes rely on being seen, and being seen is, that's enough perhaps to say that I'm present. But just because you're seen does not mean that you're present. Just because you're seen does not mean that you're a warrior in the trenches with those members, and that's what they need. They need a chaplain who can be in the trenches with them, valuable to the soldier, valuable to the Marine, the seaman, the airman. The chaplain needs to be there with the warfighter to assist them as they are in combat. And just going back really quickly to the self-care piece, I wanted to mention in the article by Devenish and Mears, they mention in their spirituality at work piece, in their article, Compassion and Self-Care, that compassion for the self-compassion is something that is necessary to care for the self. And they say in their article that it's been found by Yarnell and Neff that higher levels of self-compassion, which could also be deemed a meaning-oriented or spiritual value, have been associated with lower levels of depression, anxiety, maladaptive perfectionism, thought suppression, fear of failure, and egocentrism. So if we as chaplains and religious affairs airmen can be kind to ourselves as we are providing ourselves self-care, that is exemplifying to those whom we serve that we can be kind to ourselves. But it takes the warrior chaplain to be able to personify that characteristic of self-compassion, to let our members know that it's okay. I'm in the trenches with you. I know what you've been through is real, and I've been right there along with you. However, I can still have compassion for myself, and I'm hoping that you seeing that in me will allow you the space and the permission to be compassionate toward yourself. And in the article, it says that has helped. It is proven to help combat anxiety, maladaptive perfectionism, and depression, which are all characteristics of moral injury. So self-compassion kind of mixed in the bowl with our self-care is important for the chaplain to have, to make sure that they are exhibiting to our members, that they are providing themselves self-care. Because the military does not necessarily, there are many facets that say self-care is not important, because we have a mission, we have things to do, which is true, but the mission cannot take place without the person behind the mission. And when we care for the person behind the mission, we are consequently caring directly for the mission. So being that warrior chaplain that's real with them, that's there in the trenches, and also the one who can provide for themselves self-care is important so our members can see that modeled, because where else will they see that modeled if the chaplain does not model that for them? So back to the Warrior Chaplain, the trust that is built provides the chaplain space to become the Warrior Chaplain. So once your members are trusting in you, you are able to provide them with that sacred space. And we are moving on to recalibration and soul repair. Recalibration and soul repair. This is really, really paramount for me. It's something that I practice as a runner. Actually, I enjoy running. And there are days when I'm running where I do not want to run. I do not like running. I don't feel like running. And it takes me recalibrating my thought process and saying to myself that I can make it, I can do it. Yes, I feel the feeling of being tired, but I'm going to push through because I know that I can do it. And this is going to make me stronger. It's going to make me better. So recalibration and soul repair. Recalibration is the concept that is further being adopted in the military. And we see the military steer a little more toward warrior toughness, and away from resilience. But and it takes recalibration to produce warrior toughness. And going back to the Warrior Chaplain is absolutely necessary if you're going to guide our members in recalibration and steering them toward warrior toughness, to ensure that they are able to see their circumstances in a different light, that will make them tougher, that will make them be able to see things, reframe their situation, reframe their life circumstances as situations that can produce victory in them, situations that can produce triumph in them, even though they're hard, even though they're maybe in the hardest times of their lives. They have the ability to recalibrate how they view the situation in order to view themselves as victorious. So recalibration is a technique that I've heard in several of our videos, but it's a technique that was also mentioned by Chaplain Butler Sager, that recalibration is a technique used to build toughness in members. It's a method to reframe a situation in such a way that causes the brain to recalculate and reimagine the outcome to be utterly victorious and favorable, rather than despair-inducing. So this is directly in line with one of my favorite biblical proverbs, Proverbs 23:7, that says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." So depending on how you view a situation, that is the real life perspective that you have about that situation. And when you recalibrate your perspective, that's what you get, whatever you recalibrate it to. And if we focus on recalibration toward toughness, recalibration toward triumph, recalibration toward victory, recalibration toward this is going to work out, recalibration toward what can I gain from this terrible situation that's going to make me better. I always say, never allow a situation to come your way that is challenging and leave you void of a chance to get better. That challenge owes you something. You got to make that challenge pay. You got to make those hard times pay you dividend. You've got to make those things owe you a lesson on how to be a better you, a better warrior, a better father, a better mother, a better sister, a better brother, a better person of faith. So those things, we have to allow those things and take them by the horns and say, you are not leaving until you teach me something. Those hard times, you're not leaving until you teach me something. So we, as chaplains, are there to help our members, or offer to our members a way to recalibrate their situation, recalibrate their lives, recalibrate and reframe their stories that positions them in a place of triumph, positions them in a place where they can manage the situation in such a way that makes them better. And it takes a lot of work in the chaplain's office or with a trusted member or trusted community. It takes a lot of hard work to do that. That's why it's important for the chaplain to have the adequate self-care, because that's a lot of work, the adequate self-care to assist someone else in doing that kind of work. To also have the character to be able to be the warrior chaplain and be a person of integrity, a person of faith who lives out their faith. so that they can be there for the member to help them to do the hard, treacherous work of recalibration so that that member can get what they need in order to overcome their moral injury and work through their soul repair. So that's why those things are important. Self-care for the military chaplain, the character of the military chaplain, the idea of the military chaplain being in the trenches and being trusted as a warrior chaplain in the fight with our members, so that they can help recalibrate our members and to get them to see life from a different vantage point that will help them with their toughness. Okay, moving on to our command action plan. So the command action plan that I came up with based on the tenets of what we have learned in our class and the readings and the videos and the interviews that were all so very good. So I'm presenting a command action plan to a commander or a leadership team who wants to know more about how to identify moral injury, treat moral injury. So I've come up with the command action plan and a religious ministry plan to talk more about that. So the command action plan is to provide a working definition of moral injury to the command leadership and translate the direct correlation of how moral injury affects the mission. Because when you talk about how something affects the mission, you immediately have a captivated audience of the commanders, because that's their bottom line. They want to know, okay, chaplain, thank you, but how does this affect the mission? How does this affect our mission here being accomplished? So when you correlate how moral injury can directly affect the mission, you have their ear, you have their attention. So we start the command action plan with giving a definition of moral injury and how that affects the mission. Next, I would move on to advising on how to identify the signs of moral injury in the service member. So there are different signs, and we can share with our command team what to look for, what are the risk factors. Next, we would present various treatment options for moral injury, and of course there are many different ways that we can look for different agencies to help treat moral injury. So offer those to our leadership, as well as next presenting the actual plan, the religious ministry plan, as treatment. Like, what do you get if you, out of all the treatment options that you have, and I, the chaplain, am standing before you and telling you what my religious ministry plan, what my part will be in helping to provide spiritual support and spiritual treatment to our morally injured members. And then let them know that, because a commander also needs to know, how are we going to measure our success? And so we have to make sure that we are providing ongoing assessments for the member that may not be able to be shared with the commander based on confidentiality measures, but just to let them know that we are measuring the success of the goals that the member has for their own spiritual work that they're doing through their moral injury. And so I also created a module, which is within my PowerPoint, that kind of gives a basic plan of what the command action plan would be. So again, we define moral injury for the command or the command leadership. And it is profound guilt, shame, or anger resulting from a wound to the member's moral conscience and soul. So what does that mean? And we can talk more about what that means with the commander based on their understanding, if they need to go deeper, if they have a good idea of what we're talking about in combat, in life, with leadership. What are the things that can actually cause this profound guilt, shame, or anger? Does it only come from combat? Does it come from life in general? All of those things. But the commander can be aware, more aware of the risk factors if you know that the team is going into combat, a certain level of combat where they may be executing some mission objectives that are immoral to them. So just kind of considering those things and talking through those things and what exactly is the mission that the commander is affiliated with, and how those things can directly affect what we do. So our leadership team has to search for signs of moral injury, and in searching for signs of moral injury, we have to realize what the symptoms are. And a good marker that Steve Gunn said in his video about the signs of moral injury are withdrawal and awkwardness. We can start there, but it takes a transactional leader, a leader who is involved with their members, to know what their personality was before the moral injury, and to be able to correlate that and see what the differences are after the moral injury or the potential moral injury. So the leader must be involved with the members enough to know some differences in their character and their nature. Because when we're looking for signs of moral injury, it will likely start with awkwardness or withdrawal. So what are some signs of awkwardness or withdrawal that the leadership or the team or the wingmen may pick up, the support team may pick up on, to say, hey, something's going on. So now I need to reach in and see what's going on. And once you've reached in to the individual and said, hey, I think, we might need to talk some more about what's going on with you. I noticed some differences in you. I just want to sit down with you and just really see how you're doing. And if there's some help that you need to get, I want to help you and support you in getting that help. And then if the member is willing, after the moral injury has been identified, we investigate the treatment options. So there's several different treatment options. You have mental health, you have the chaplain, you have military family life counselor and FLAC, you have military one source. There are different treatment options that can help. So we point those members in the right direction. But when we point those members as the chaplain, when we reach into the commander and say, I am one of those resources that you may use to help your members with their moral injury, we let them know that we are well able and capable to help with the moral injury. Because as it is a spiritual wound, a soul wound, that is our lane, that is where we find our expertise. So we're capable to do that, and offer to them the other treatment options as well. And once we do that, we offer to them our specific religious ministry plan, our specific RMP, what we plan to do as the chaplain to assist. And so what I really enjoy, and what I came up with from our religious ministry plan, was to construct that plan with the idea of confession being the foundation. So I really enjoy the writing by Antel and Winings, where they discuss the power of confession and creating a space of grace, a space where the member can see themselves and perhaps recalibrate, right? See themselves in a different way, where they are able to offer themselves grace as they confess. Confession is good for the soul, goes the old saying. And in Antel and Winings, page 389 of their article, it says, confession is just one among many classic spiritual disciplines that religious leaders and educators can employ and teach about to tend moral injury and reconcile the morally wounded to God and community. And what I really like about the idea of confession is that we can use that across the board and make it as religious or non-religious as we would have it to be, as far as our members would have it to be. So confession does not require religion. It just requires a safe space to disclose, listening, compassionate ears to listen, and articulation of what's going on inside of the member, and just confessing those things. And so once we investigate the treatment options, and I, as a treatment option, the chaplain, offer my religious ministry plan, which is of confession, and providing a safe space for folks to confess and come to grips with their pain and seek perhaps redemption. Once we've done that, I then offer to the command to say, yes, you have additional resources. I am your resource. I'm your spiritual resource. This is a soul wound, a spiritual wound. So I'm the Shmi here. This is my plan to meet weekly or bi-weekly with the member and go through hard work of confession in order to get to a place where the member feels hopeful in some kind of way. They can recalibrate even in their confessions to that these things that have happened can somehow produce an outcome where hope can be ensued. And then from there, I let them know that there will be ongoing assessment, because the commander needs assessment. The commander needs to know how we can measure the success of what we plan to do. And the assessment is to have the member come up with a clear, measurable way to go from where they are in the moment to where their particular idea of healing is. So each week, I would imagine having a marker, kind of like when we measure our children on the wall, but some kind of marker where we can say, how close are we to the goal of wholeness? Did we make any steps back? Have we made leaps and bounds forward? How close are we? So that they can measure inwardly how they're feeling about feeling whole or getting to their wholeness. So we define it for the commander. We relate it to the mission. We let them know that this moral injury can be a direct hindrance to the mission. We've got their ear now. Then we let them know how to look for moral injury in the members. What are the risk factors? Once we identify it, how do we treat it? If we are using the chaplain, this is the chaplain's plan. We're going to work through confession, and we're going to measure how we're doing to make sure that we have something that is measurable to make sure that we're making actual progress. So the religious ministry plan just creates space for grace to grow through the vehicle of confession. And, I would use journal writing or storytelling, like I mentioned, the songs of lament, self-compassion, recalibration and restoration to the community and to the divine. And additionally have an assessment process that is crafted by the member for them to measure toward their goals of wholeness. All right, so that is my religious ministry plan for just a cohesive plan for the soul repair of a morally injured service member. And we have talked about the military chaplain and self-care, because that's paramount, because this work cannot be done with a chaplain who is empty. Then we talked about the character of the military chaplain, that the character of the military chaplain must be intact, must be a character of integrity in order to gain trust of the members to be their warrior chaplain and be in the trenches with them and say what they do and do what they say, and that be a life lived of integrity. We talked about recalibration and soul repair, and the chaplain's responsibility in helping our members to recalibrate and move towards soul repair and recalibrate in such a way that they feel spiritually tough, that they feel toughness ensuing, and not that they've been overcome by their circumstance. That's not a feeling that they can have, they likely will have. That's moral injury. But getting them to come to a place where perhaps they can recalibrate and think differently from a different vantage point. That is the chaplain's way of ministering to them, to perhaps help them to see a different vantage point of what they're going through and to build toughness there. Additionally, we've talked about the command action plan module to kind of define what moral injury is to the command team. Let them know that moral injury can and will directly affect the mission, so it needs to be paid attention to. Once we've defined it and correlated it to the mission, how do you find the moral injury in your members? How do you identify the risk factors of moral injury? Give them the tools and the things to look for. In addition, give them the treatment options, those outside of the chaplain and that of the chaplain. And that of the chaplain will require the religious ministry plan, which in this chaplain would be that of confession and psalms of lament, storytelling, and just kind of getting in the trenches of what happened and helping them to possibly recalibrate what has happened to them, to give them a sense of toughness. So I can be that warrior chaplain for them and be with them in those moments and help them to recalibrate and think differently, that they don't allow that circumstance to toss them to and fro, but they take from that circumstance, they manage the circumstance in such a way that they become better for having experienced it. And that is the religious ministry plan of the chaplain, and to additionally offer assessment and how are we doing, and how does that measure up to last week, and how close are we to your measure of wholeness. And that's what the command action plan for our commanders would look like. And that's what my religious ministry plan would look like, in a cohesive plan to care for our morally injured service members of the military. That's been my presentation. Thank you for listening.